Hong quickly attracted a community of believers, primarily Hakkas like himself. They believed in the prophecy of dreams and claimed they could walk on air. Hong and his rivals believed in the prophecy of dreams and claimed they could walk on air. Hong and his rivals for leadership in the movement went in and out of ecstatic trances. They denounced the Manchus as creatures of Satan. News of the sect reached the government, and Qing troops arrived to arrest the Taiping leaders, but the Taipings soundly repelled the imperial troops. Local loyalty to the Taiping spread quickly. Their numbers multiplied, and they began to enlarge their domain. Hakkas versus Manchus. The Taipings relied at first on Hakka sympathy and the charismatic appeal of their religious doctrine to attract followers. But as their numbers and power grew, they altered their methods of preaching and governing. They replaced the anti-Chinese appeals used to enlist Hakkas with anti-Manchu rhetoric designed to enlist Chinese. They forced captured villages to join their movement. Once people were absorbed, the Taipings strictly monitored their activities. They segregated men and women and organized them into work and military teams. Women were forbidden to bind their feet. The Hakkas had never practiced foot binding, and participated fully in farming and labor. Brigades of women soldiers took to the field against the Qing forces. Capture of Nanjing. As the movement grew, it began to move toward eastern and northern China. Panic preceded the Taipings. Villagers feared to be forced into Taiping units, and Confucian elites recoiled in horror from the bizarre ideology of foreign gods. Totalitarian rule and warring woman. But the huge numbers of Taipings were able to muster overwhelmed attempts at local defense. The tremendous growth in the number of Taiping followers required the movement to establish a permanent base when the rebel army conquered Nanjing. In 1853, the Taiping leaders decided to settle there and make it to the capital of the new heavenly kingdom of great peace. Qing forces attempting to defend North China. Military reforms. Qing forces attempting to defend North China became more successful as problems of organization and growing numbers slowed Taiping momentum. Increasing Qing military success resulted mainly from the flexibility of the imperial military commanders in the face of an unprecedented challenge. In addition, the military commanders received strong backing from a group of civilian provincial governors who had studied the techniques developed by the local militia forces for self-defense. Certain provincial governors combined their knowledge of civilian self-defense and local terrain with more efficient organization and the use of modern weaponry. The result was the formation of the new military units, in which many of the bannermen voluntarily served under civilian governors. The Qing court agreed to special taxes to fund the new armies and acknowledged the new combined leadership. When the Taiping settled into Nanjing, the new Qing army surrounded the city, hoping to starve out the rebels. The Taipings, however, had provisions and fortified themselves well. They also had the services of several brilliant young military commanders, who mobilized enormous campaigns in nearby parts of eastern China, scavenging supplies and attempting to break the encirclement of Nanjing. For more than a decade, the Taiping leadership remained ensconced at Nanjing, and the heavenly kingdom endured. European intervention. In 1856, Britain and France, freed from the From there, preoccupation with the Crimean War turned their attention to China. European and American missionaries had visited Nanjing, curious to see what their fellow Christians were up to. Their reports were discouraging. Hong Chuang-chuan and the other leaders appeared to lead lives of indulgence and abandon. And more than the missionary accused them of homosexual practices. Relieved of the possible accusations of squashing a pious Christian movement, the British and French surveyed the situation. Though the Taipings were not going to topple the Qing, rebellious Nian bands in northern China added a new threat in the 1850s. A series of simultaneous large insurrections might indeed destroy the empire. Moreover, since the Qing had not observed all of the provisions of the treaties signed after the Opium War, Britain and France were now considering renewing war on the Qing themselves. In 1856, the British and French launched a series of swift, brutal coastal attacks, a second Opium War called the Arrow War, 1856 to 1860, which culminated in a British and French invasion of Beijing and the sacking of the Summer Palace in 1860. A new round of treaties punished the Qing for not enacting all the provisions of the Treaty of Nanking. Having secured their principal objective, the British and French forces then joined the Qing campaign against the Taipings. Attempts to coordinate the international forces were sometimes riotous and sometimes tragic, but the injection of European weaponry and money helped quell both the Taiping and the Nian rebellions during the 1860s. The Taiping Rebellion ranks as the world's bloodiest civil war and the greatest armed conflict before the 20th century. Estimates of deaths range from 20 million to 30 million. The loss of life came primarily from starvation and disease, for most engagements consisted of surrounding fortified cities of waiting until the enemy forces died, surrendered, or were so weakened that they could be easily defeated. Many sieges continued for months. Reports of people eating grass, leather, hemp, and human flesh were widespread. The dead were rarely buried properly, and epidemic disease was common. Death and disease. The area of early Taiping fighting was close to the regions of southwest China in which bubonic plague had been lingering for centuries. When the rebellion was suppressed, many Taiping followers sought safety in the highlands of Laos and Vietnam, which soon showed infestation by plague. Within a few years, the disease reached Hong Kong. From there, it spread to Singapore, San Francisco, Calcutta, and London. In the late 1800s, there was intense apprehension over the possibility of a worldwide outbreak. The Chinese immigrants were regarded as likely carriers. This fear became a contributing factor in the passage of discriminatory immigration bans on Chinese in the United States of America in 1882. The Taiping Rebellion devastated the agricultural centers of China. Lasting devastation. Many of the most intensely cultivated regions of central and eastern China were depopulated. Some were still uninhabited decades later, and major portions of the country did not recover until the 20th century. Cities, too, were hard hit. Shanghai, a treaty port of modest size before the rebellion, saw its population multiplied many times by the arrival of refugees from war-blasted neighboring provinces. The city then endured months of siege by the Taipings. Major cultural centers in eastern China lost masterpieces of art and architecture. Imperial libraries were burned or their collections exposed to the weather, and the printing blocks used to make books were destroyed. While the empire faced the mountainous challenge of dealing with the material and cultural destruction of the war, it also was burdened by a major ecological disaster in the north. The Yellow River changed course in 1855, destroying the southern part of the impoverished Shandong province with flood and initiating decades of drought along the former riverbed in northern Shandong.